Can you build your own home server for just $150? Well, yeah, you can pretty much make a server with any working computer. So I guess the real question here is, what's the best home server you can build for just $150? Well, in this video, I'm hopefully going to assemble a competent system that can store files and backups, stream media, run game servers, and more, all for a fairly reasonable budget of just $150, assuming everything goes to plan. Uh-oh. Now, this actually isn't the first time I've done a $150 build video. In fact, one of the first videos on this channel was a $150 DIY NAS build. And well, some people got pretty mad at that video because I didn't include the cost of the hard drives, which yeah, I get, but I was trying to compare that system with some pre-built systems. Anyway, I actually ended up redoing that video a bit later, building another $150 NAS that included the cost of the hard drives. I definitely had to cut some corners to make things work, even installing the operating system onto a flash drive. But in the end, I had a working system. That was all the way back in 2022 though. So I thought it might be fun today to revisit the idea in late 2025 to see how things might have changed. Now technically I called those previous videos NAS builds, whereas I'm calling this a home server, but well, both of those NAS systems I built in the past were more than capable of running other services outside of just storing files. The definitions of NAS and home server, or even the word server in general, are very broad, and that conversation can get really messy really quick. In this video, I wanted to build something that I think covers a lot of ground and would possibly meet the needs of many people looking to build their first home server. Something that can store files, backups, and media, but can also run applications like Jellyfin or Plex to stream that media to their devices. On top of that, you might want to be able to spin up your own Minecraft server, or set up your own private VPN, or automate your home with Home Assistant, or run any of the other amazing self-hosted applications that are out there. So to get started, I hopped online and began looking on eBay and other sites trying to come up with the best all-rounder home server I could come up with for just $150. And at this point, everything has arrived in the mail, so let's check out what I bought and see if we can get this server up and running. All right, first I want to apologize for this camera angle. It's not the best. I wanted to have my top-down shot like I normally would, but my second camera died, so I'm stuck with just this one. So hopefully it's not too bad. Hopefully you guys can still see what's going on. All right, first up we have this box, and in here, wait, these aren't computer parts. These are just awesome little devices from this video's sponsor, UGREEN. This is the UGREEN Nexode 100 watt retractable charger, and it's probably going to become your new favorite charger because of this right here. UGREEN has sort of ruined regular cables for me because this 0.75 meter retractable cable makes it so easy to charge your devices while keeping things nice and tidy. This little guy has sort of become just our base station in the kitchen where we charge everything because, well, it's so compact, but it's also powerful. It can deliver up to 100 watts on a single port, which is enough to charge a 14-inch MacBook Pro to 54% in just 30 minutes. And you aren't just limited to the built-in cable. It also has 2 more USB-C ports as well as a Type A port. This means you can charge up to 4 devices, so you don't have to keep up with a bunch of different chargers that are cluttering up your space or taking up room in your bag when you travel. Oh, and speaking of travel, this UGREEN MagFlow magnetic power bank is perfect when you're on the go. This portable charger supports the latest Qi 2 standard that can provide up to 25 watts of wireless charging power. It's perfect for keeping my iPhone topped off when I'm on the go. And for your other devices, you can use the USB-C port or the carry handle because, well, it's also a USB-C cable. So if you want to keep all of your devices charged up while also decluttering your bag or your desk, make sure to check out the UGREEN Nexode 100 watt retractable charger and the MagFlow magnetic power bank. Check out my link down in the description to see UGREEN's incredible Black Friday deals where you can get up to 40% off. All right, now to some actual boxes. And as you might be able to tell from the tape here, this box is indeed from Server Part Deals. Now, if you're not familiar, Server Part Deals sells hard drives. I've actually been sponsored by them in the past, not sponsored, clearly. But I decided I would start by buying some hard drives because, well, that can get pretty expensive. So let's check out what I bought really quick. Yeet. All right, as you can see, I bought 2 different hard drives, and these are some refurbished Western Digital 2 terabyte SATA drives. And yeah, that's probably not that great, but it's what I could afford on my budget if I wanted to be able to buy 2 of them. And technically having multiple hard drives for redundancy isn't a necessity, but I think for most people, if you're using a server to store files or media, it's probably important enough that you at least want to have 1 drive worth of redundancy. So I decided to buy 2 of these. since Server Part Deals does offer free shipping. In total, I paid $85.98. All right, so we've got our 4 terabytes of raw storage. Realistically, we're gonna put these in a mirror, which means we're gonna have 2 terabytes of usable storage, but we're going to need somewhere to actually put these, which leads me to my next box, which is not a box of pretzels. Hopefully there's a computer in here. They literally just wrapped this thing in flat rate envelopes. Interesting choice. Surprise, surprise, I ordered, oh, it's upside down. And surprise, surprise, I ordered an OEM desktop tower, which I guess you guys probably already knew that from the B-roll and the thumbnail. But yeah, I did buy this Dell Optiplex 3040, and I was kind of hoping to not just go the buy a pre-built desktop that can hold 2 hard drives route, but after kind of looking around, realistically, if you want to get something that can have a bit of storage and also have a decent amount of compute and some expansion options for a good all-around home server, there really aren't that many better options for a tight budget like $150. Let's try to get this thing cracked open really quick. Is that it? I assume this would have some latches or something. I've never actually looked at an Optiplex 3040 tower, so this is a little bit new to me. But I think this is one of those systems where this sort of just folds up like that. Okay, interesting. Uh-oh.
20 minutes later.
All right, well, this is great. So I didn't have a lot of time trying to put this all together. It's been crazy around here. We're trying to sell our house. It's a whole mess. And being on a bit of a time crunch, I decided to just find a good option that I thought worked well that might have some downsides, but I didn't quite realize how big of a downside this was. Apparently the 3040 has the option to support a 3.5-inch drive. You can even see there's some instructions on here that show a 3.5-inch drive, but I guess it can either support 1 3.5-inch drive or 2 2.5-inch drives. I didn't realize that, and I guess somewhere looking at spec sheets and such, I got mixed up. And well, as it turns out, this guy only supports a slim optical drive, a 5.25-inch drive, and 2 2.5-inch drives. And I have 2 3.5-inch drives. So, yeah. I do have an idea where I think I can make this all work, so we'll get to how I'm going to mount everything later, but for now let's go ahead and talk about this system. This is the Dell Optiplex 3040 MT mini tower, I think. This does support Intel Skylake CPUs, so in here is the Intel i3-6100, which is a dual-core 4-threaded chip. Nothing crazy, but Skylake was a really good architecture. It's honestly great for how old it is in terms of self-hosting because it's pretty efficient. It has decent performance for a lot of things you might be wanting to run, and it also includes some pretty good quick sync video acceleration for transcoding. It's not as good as Kaby Lake because I think Kaby Lake can decode HEVC 10-bit at 4K. I was kind of hoping that I could update to Kaby Lake. On the 3050 series you can, on the 3040 series you can't. There's also some other weird quirks with the 3040. You may be able to see on some B-roll here. While this is Skylake, which supports DDR4, this motherboard actually is using DDR3L, which I totally forgot that Skylake and Kaby Lake both support DDR4 and DDR3L, which is still just really odd. But fortunately, one of the reasons I bought this system in particular is because it came with 16 gigabytes, which a lot of the other budget systems I was finding only came with like 4 or 8. It also came with a 240 gig SATA SSD, which will work great as a boot drive. And also with the mini tower layout, you get some nice perks like having some PCIe slots if you ever want to add some faster networking or maybe even some NVMe storage or something like that. Now, assuming we can actually get everything in here, this should hopefully be a solid little setup that shouldn't consume too much power and should be able to store files and do some cool home servery stuff. But, well, let's actually see if this is even working. I kind of want to test it out. Nope, I don't have time. I'm just going to put the cover back on and hope that it doesn't get my room all dusty. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that I made an offer on this for just $48, which the seller accepted, and after shipping, that bumped the total up to $149.17, just under our $150 budget. If you don't include sales tax, because I forgot about sales tax, but let's just assume I live in a state where there's no sales tax, and then yeah, $150 budget. All right, we're gonna plug this in and see if it turns on. Oh, okay. Whew. That took a long time. Let's see if it posts. Okay, there we go. We're in the BIOS. Okay, we've got our 16 gigs of RAM. We have our i3 6100. It looks like we are good to go. So I think next I'm going to try to clean this system out, figure out a good way to mount our drives, and then we'll move on to installing some software and actually getting this set up as a janky but still hopefully decent little DIY home server. After getting all of the dust cleaned out, I needed to find a way to get those two drives mounted in this case. I started by just drilling out the rivets that hold the 2.5-inch drive case in place. With that removed, there's actually quite a bit of open space in this part of the case for some drives, but there's not actually a way to mount them. So I made a little template that lines up perfectly with 4 of the screw holes on the bottom side of the hard drives, and then used that to drill out a few holes in the sheet metal. Probably would have been fine just screwing the drives directly up against the case, that's how plenty of OEM systems are, but I figured adding in a few of these little silicone washers would be a nice touch. It was a little bit awkward, but I managed to get the drives mounted and then reassembled the case. Now I had my completed server, at least in terms of hardware, but I still needed an operating system. And here I wasn't entirely sure what to do. Normally I would just install Proxmox. This would let me easily spin up containers or VMs and let me run whatever I wanted. But in keeping with the spirit of this project, I decided to go for something a bit more simple. Unraid would have been a great choice if it wasn't for the fact that it costs money and I didn't have any more room in my budget. And while TrueNAS is my go-to for simple network-attached storage, I don't love the Docker interface for running other applications. Plus, with how TrueNAS works, my 256GB SSD would only be used as the boot drive, so we couldn't use that for anything else, like having some faster storage for our Docker containers. So I ended up deciding to give OpenMediaVault a shot. Now, I've never really loved the UI, but it is pretty simple, and it's been a while since I last tried it out. So I downloaded and ran the installer, but whenever I tried to get my OpenMediaVault install to boot, well, it wouldn't. After struggling with that for a bit, well, I sort of just decided to go ahead and try out Proxmox anyway, and that installed just fine. However, my plan to virtualize everything sort of fell through when I found that the system doesn't seem to support IOMMU. That meant I couldn't pass through the SATA controller to a TrueNAS VM like I had planned. But then it hit me. I had managed to install Proxmox just fine, which is built on Debian. OpenMediaVault is also built on Debian, and in fact you can technically just install OpenMediaVault on top of a pre-existing Debian install. So I ran my Debian 13 installer, got into the operating system, started installing OpenMediaVault, and well, then I realized that Debian 13 isn't supported by OpenMediaVault 7, the current version. So I fired up my Debian 12 installer, went through the install process, and well, then I ran into the exact same issue I had initially when I first tried to just install OpenMediaVault. Now, it took me quite a while to figure out exactly what was going on, which is a bit embarrassing because, well, I've actually stumbled across this exact issue in the past. And ironically, it was with a Dell Wise Thin client that also has the model number 3040. Essentially, there's this UEFI quirk with certain Dell systems where it will just ignore custom boot entries. So the fix for Debian is to go back into the installer and run rescue mode. From there, you can run a command that copies the bootloader entry to a fallback location. Anyway, with that all sorted out, I was able to just reinstall OpenMediaVault and run this simple fix. Like I said, it's been a while since I've used OpenMediaVault, but it was still fairly simple to access the web UI, create my RAID array and file system, and then create some SMB shares. I was able to access those shares from my PC and copy files to and from without issue. Well, as long as you don't consider gigabit speeds to be an issue, I guess. And after getting that installed and all of the NAS stuff set up, the system was idling at around 20 watts, which isn't all that bad. With storage all squared away, I wanted to start installing some Docker containers. That way we could actually start running some cool applications. In OpenMediaVault, this is a little bit odd because you have to install a plugin called OpenMediaVault Extras, and then from there you can enable Docker and install the Compose plugin. This is OpenMediaVault's Docker management solution, which uses, as the name suggests, Docker Compose. Now, not being familiar with the specific interface, I found it a little bit tricky to get started, but fortunately I found some great info over at DB Tech's channel, where he has a handful of videos on OpenMediaVault and setting up Docker. After a bit of trial and error, I got a few containers installed, including Jellyfin, Home Assistant, Crafty Controller, and Tailscale. For Jellyfin, I was able to create a few folders in my SMB share for movies and shows, and then made bind mounts to those folders to mount them in the container. I configured hardware-accelerated transcoding with QuickSync, and with compatible codecs and formats, the transcoding performance was solid. However, like I mentioned earlier, the Skylake integrated graphics don't support decoding certain formats like 10-bit HEVC, so those have to be decoded with the CPU. This meant I was getting pretty poor performance when trying to transcode certain files. And sadly, the i3-6100 was even a bit worse in that regard than I realized. As far as I can tell, it doesn't properly support tone mapping for HDR content. So if you're able to direct stream that content, you're fine. But if the client is incompatible or you're limited by bandwidth and you need to transcode, you'll end up with a washed out, desaturated image. I really wish I would have somehow found a system in my budget that included a 7th gen Intel chip for this reason, as I believe not only do these support decoding 10-bit HEVC, they also have support for Intel's VPP tone mapping. That being said, if you were stuck with a system like this but really needed better options for transcoding, you could consider dropping in a graphics card. I also ran some other containers though, like Crafty controller. Here I set up a vanilla Minecraft server, and well, while the 6th gen dual core might not be able to handle multiple concurrent servers, running one seemed to work just fine. I also configured Home Assistant, which, well, it worked just fine. After that, I spun up a Tailscale container, and after adding the device to my Tailnet, I could access my server via the hostname or Tailscale IP from anywhere. This meant I could access the OpenMedia Vault dashboard or my other containers, even over a cellular connection. Okay, so this project took a bit more work than I was expecting, and I definitely made some mistakes with my PC purchase. But at the end of the day, I have a working server that does everything that I was hoping it would. I have a working NAS, albeit at 1 gigabit speeds and with only 2 terabytes of storage, but I also have working containers for Jellyfin, Home Assistant, Tailscale, and I have a Minecraft server. Plus, I have the ability to run just about any other service I might want to, and I got all of that for, well, a little bit over $150. I gotta be honest, $150 is actually a really tricky budget to try to stay under. I chose that number just because that's what I did a few years ago, but I feel like spending just a little bit more would have netted me a significantly better system. Had I just spent like $10 more, I probably could have picked up something like this Elite Desk G3 small form factor, which not only has 2 actual 3.5-inch drive bays, but it comes with a 7th gen CPU, which opens up a lot more options when it comes to transcoding. Now, when it comes to hard drives, I don't think I could have done that much better just because the price of hard drives adds up really quickly unless you start looking at really sketchy options, which I don't recommend. But I will say that spending some more money early on some larger capacity drives is probably going to be worth it in the long run, unless you just know for sure you're only going to be storing some small files. Now, another affordable but big upgrade here would have been to add in some faster networking. 2.5 gigabit PCIe cards and switches are quite affordable these days, and having over twice the amount of bandwidth can be a very noticeable improvement depending on your use case. Like I said, all in all, it's not perfect, but it does get the job done. And hopefully this just goes to show that you can set up your own server and get it running without having to completely break the bank. Just maybe do a bit more research than I did. I do kind of want to apologize. I wanted this video to be a bit more polished, but my life's been kind of crazy right now. We're trying to get our house sold and get ready to move, and things have just been kind of crazy, and so I feel like I kind of made a few more mistakes than I normally would on this one, so hopefully you guys can forgive me. Anyway, hopefully you still enjoyed it. That's about it for this one though, so as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay curious, and I really can't wait to see you in the next one.